I want to leave here right now, and I want to go hug my daughter, and I can't. I have 7 more weeks, and my focus is just to survive. I almost didn't survive till my trial. I literally had a gun in my mouth because I couldn't live with what I was being accused of, and I couldn't get any help. I was crying from the moment I woke up to the moment I went to bed. I had to give up work to get therapy. I think it's you're handing guys a loaded gun.
My name's Kris. I'm 47, recently separated, not by choice, and my circumstances are bringing me a substantial amount of parental alienation. The conditions that were put on me during the evidentiary and trial phase can't help but generate a high level of parental alienation. This means not having access to have a dialogue with my daughter's educators. I can't attend her school for fear that I assault my former spouse in a videotaped lobby full of parents and children and my peers in my community. I was also prohibited from starting the family court process, as even third-party shuttle mediation was viewed as too risky. So I didn't have the opportunity to provide any emotional support for my former spouse or my child during the separation. Both my wife and I are recreational drinkers. We enjoy the social aspects of the night out, and we drink when we're cooking. My wife picked up a bit of a substance issue in her last month of post-secondary. I think it was tied to, it was a high-pressure course load. My work was very demanding. We're struggling a lot to adapt to these changes, and I'm not an addictions counselor, but it seemed it was damaging our relationship, the pressure we were under, and she was drinking more than I thought was appropriate for her well-being and the presence of the kid. When my partner and I would drink, one person was required to stay abstinence and safeguard our little brain trust, given the decision-making ability and the veto. And in this instance, exercising that trust caused some issues with my friend's drinking partner, a woman of around the same age, who had a sensitivity to domestic violence from her own experience. The day in question, one of what I view as her worst choices in drinking companions was having a crisis. So my wife, well, my ex now, she backburnered taking the kid to a Santa Claus parade because she felt the need to help her close friend and confidant process this thing that I believe was linked to Leah's ex-partner not meeting her expectations around Christmas for their shared child. So Barbara, my former spouse, goes to pick her up, and she's got her 11-year-old in tow. And they meet at a restaurant, and Leah's drunk already at noon with her kid in tow. So when she got back to the house, I had misgivings. But I don't dictate my wife's choices. If this is the choice she makes, I'll try and do my best to plug myself into the decision. What value can I add? So I sort of took care of the evening. I invited another male friend who my daughter likes over to help carry the load, and we cooked. Tried to serve him a healthy amount of alcohol, throw a video on for the kids, and support my wife in her efforts to cope with someone who I wasn't really fond of to begin with. And it got ugly really quick. Her friend had a lot to drink, and I don't think much sleep, and her daughter was uncomfortable. And there was a lot of dialogue over her cell phone that day to other people about what a rat bastard her ex was, and a lot of foul language, a lot of yelling. And I made a few attempts to tone it down and keep it light, but it exceeded my skill set exponentially rapidly. I didn't view this as healthy stuff for my kid to be exposed to, right? I wasn't raised that way, and I think it's inappropriate to do that kind of process with alcohol in front of a 6-year-old kid. It just made me uncomfortable. So my friend David and I went to his place. He has a mobility issue, and he wanted me to get him a bottle of wine. He had company the next day. So we went for a walk, and we started mapping out our exit strategy. Do we keep both the kids, and do we send the girls out? Do we send her home with her kid? Like, what's happening next, and how can we be ready? So he gave me his keys, just in case getting the kids somewhere safe became an eventuality. And I went and got some ice cream and a cantaloupe for dessert. I came back, and I was faced with their decision to troop across town with the kids for a unplanned sleepover, which under normal circumstances would have been great. The kids are friends, but this was alcohol driven. Leah's condition was pretty volatile. She wasn't in the best shape. She'd assaulted my former partner a couple times on drinking episodes. So viscerally, I was like, no. It was a school night. There was no overnight bag packed. It was already past her bedtime. My wife, I think, had an exam. And I was pretty firm. I was like, no, I've been feeding your kid and coping with this shit all day. I've had enough. It makes me uncomfortable. So she was given the option of leave with your kid, leave without your kid, leave with or without my spouse. But you got to go. And her reaction was not, I guess it was what I expected, and maybe I asked for it. She was livid. She started screaming and calling me names, cursing, no one tells us what to do, fuck you. And this is while I'm holding my almost unconscious 5-year-old. I said, fine, I'm leaving. And I took my daughter and I took Dave's keys and I went to leave. And my wife panicked. She grabs me by the thumb and she's like, there's no goddamn way you're leaving me alone with this psycho, right? And I'm like, no, now I've got an angry person behind me screaming, and I've got an angry and panicked person between me and the exit screaming. So after she grabbed me, I pushed her aside. I went to the hallway. I said, get my daughter a snowsuit and her boots, and we can come process this. But I need to get her away from this now. So my wife comes out a minute later, and she's fine. She's a little upset. She's a little edgy. And we spend about 5 minutes getting the kid dressed, going over what this is going to look like, me reinforcing the need that maybe this woman's kid might want to come, and agreeing to revisit it when things had calmed down. In the interim, her friend is on the phone to 14 Division here in the GTA, accusing me of pounding my wife with multiple blows to the head whilst holding a screaming 6-year-old. So there's a bit of a disconnect between our experience of the evening and perceptions of the justice system. These allegations are such that there's not really a lot of room for them to do much but dispense of them through a full evidentiary hearing. My spouse went insane. She was furious. She was livid. But by the time the police got there, I was 2 buildings over and I could hear her screaming, like just screaming. And I was so grateful I got my child out of there before she was exposed to alcohol-driven yelling conflict with police cars. I mean, she's 6. It's my job to jump on grenades to make sure she never gets exposed to that. So I called the police and I'm like, we have to address the situation. By this point, they were already looking for me and prepared to charge me with a really high level of alarming violence in the presence of my kid. Those are the degree of violence I'm accused of, and the aggravating factor of the children present have shaped this into something really bad for my spouse, my child, and myself. What kind of woman would want to work through these issues with that type of guy? What does that speak to about her choices and her ability to make effective choices for my daughter? What does that say to the CAS about my suitability as a parent? And they're not allegations because they've been given weight that allows people to make determinations about our future. And that's fueling my alienation. I have limited access to my child. inconsistently limited access to my child. Fortunately, I was blessed with a CIS worker that sees through this and sees my value in continuing a relationship with my child, stresses the urgency. She made me aware that my absence ramps up my daughter's risk of academic struggle, exposure to inappropriate partners, drug and alcohol, early streamlining in the educational system, poor choices in her future relationships, and her own self-esteem. So that made me reframe how I fight this fight and the steps I'm prepared to take to be an effective parent. But it's not easy. I don't have any history of violence. There was none of that in the context of our relationship. Like, I've effectively lost my best friend, the person I've been intimate with the longest, and a year with my kid. And my concern is how to survive that, how to learn the appropriate lessons from it, and to come out the other end of this with some shred of my family intact, that we can honor the stewardship of my daughter's future we've been given. And I'm finding the challenge of even keeping mentally and physically healthy with this level of stress, it's daunting. I've had substance abuse issues and mental health issues from depression and anxiety that didn't exist before this incident. It broke me into a million pieces, and when I tried to put those pieces back together, I found my case file was so loaded that a lot of my expression around this was looked at reshaping the narrative that I'm trying to dodge accountability or shift the blame or control the outcome. And it's made it really challenging to get appropriate mental health supports that I can be honest with, because I'm the boogeyman now. Regardless of my position as a volunteer in the community, regardless of the stewardship my community gave me of their own children, I'm the boogeyman, and I now have to admit I'm the boogeyman in order to be seen as healing, and I can't. I just feel the justice system's in my way. They're not comfortable with a guy who's accountable for his own choices and who's hitting the ground running. So my efforts to take control of my own life, my own choices, good or bad, and responsibility for my choices and behaviors, is seen as resistant and non-compliant. The only choice I'm being given is to confess, and then they'll give me my life back. But I don't know how to raise a 6-year-old child who's looking to me on the foundation of a fundamental untruth that doesn't fit in the healing I'm trying to do. I just had a judicial pretrial, and I was offered the chance to sign on to their narrative. And rather than contest it, I'm implying it's incomplete. There's no voice for the other adult male that was present. That his story hasn't been investigated. No one's called him. The last look at disclosure I had, there's nothing from my spouse other than get out of my house and leave me alone. She's never been empowered to speak, because her speech must come from either fear of me or an inability to survive economically without me present. I know that isms are exclusionary. I know that my lawyer was framing this in terms of my oppression as a minority male. That's racism. I know feminism has a particular set of precepts, but all isms, I think, don't embrace other points of view. Not to question the validity of feminists. I was raised by a coterie of feminists, and that's where I learned the respect I have for female power and the value I place in male accountability. I think my story needs to be told. I think I'm healing by telling it. And as long as I can keep that narrative free of sexism and free of bitterness and open to a transgendered point of view, like what does domestic violence look like from the scope of a lesbian or homosexual relationship, right? There's a reason I'm learning this stuff, and I hope there's a place for me to go with the rest of my process, and I hope there's some value in what I've gone through for anyone who hears the story. but I'm sensitive to how dangerous ground this is, how misogynistically, bullheadedly evil I must look by default to some people, and how the wrong people would excuse me of all culpability and blame it entirely on my partner's failings. I just think a middle ground is the solution for all social problems, and this approach is torching villages. This isn't a minority man's struggle. This isn't a disempowered woman's struggle. It's primarily a child struggle and a human struggle. So when we fragment my oppression from my spouses, we're splitting the resources, right? We're now fighting two different fights with two different lobby groups trying to decide whose issue this really is. This issue belongs to me and my partner. It's our family, and we have to pick up the wreckage now and move on. And I don't feel comfortable doing that if we're both being told how to define it. It means A, B, C, or I'm not listening. And to her, it means A, B, C. So the odds are stacked against us in a really powerful way for us to do what we both want to do, and that's get it behind us and take care of our daughter. The dice are loaded against her now with a year of my absence. And every day passes, her potential liability from this experience grows. So I'm almost in a hurry enough to take the plea they're offering. Almost. I was pen in hand. And I'm doing a lot of First Nation spirituality work, which doesn't incorporate lying. It doesn't incorporate the easy road. It incorporates occasionally taking the hit. Like, do I want to make this about winning or losing? Can I sidestep that narrative and make it about healing and learning and growing? Not within the current confines of the justice system. How does one be told you may not touch, bathe, nurture, cook for, counsel, love? You may not parent until we decide if these allegations are true. I don't know of any other area of criminal justice where that happens. I'm not a lawyer. But the hardest thing I ever had to do was not breach these bail conditions. I want to leave here right now, and I want to go hug my daughter, and I can't. I have 7 more weeks, and my focus is just to survive. And I think that's what's missing in the system, is helping men accused of this type of crime stay mentally and emotionally well enough to honor the commitments the courts are asking us to make. Like, I almost didn't survive till my trial. I literally had a gun in my mouth because I couldn't live with what I was being accused of, and I couldn't get any help. I was crying from the moment I woke up to the moment I went to bed. I had to give up work to get therapy. I think it's you're handing guys a loaded gun. Stay away from the people you care about the most in the world until we determine the truth of these allegations, despite everything we've taught you your entire life about the importance of taking care of your family. There was a real lack of support for me in terms of surviving this and getting stuff into play for our eventual inevitable reconnection as a family. I'm being societally engineered to be an angry, bitter, frustrated, childless, old broken down man who's nothing but a cash machine and a weekend at Wonderland. And I want more for my child for that, and I want more for my ex-partner. I want to be able to be her friend. I want to be happy to see her receive the love that I wasn't able to provide. I want her life to be full of abundance, joy, and self-satisfaction. And if I can only be a witness to that rather than a part of that process, that's enough. Because then I know my child's getting a quality of nurturing and care that I'm comfortable with. I can't frame this in terms of win or lose. Winning my case won't get me the two missing first teeth, the Christmas play, the good night stories, the helping with the homework, the ability to provide for my family and define our transition to the next steps of our lives. And I don't think losing my case is going to teach me any lesson that I haven't learned about interpersonal power dynamics and privilege and perception.
We have a no contact order, but we live in such a close-knit community that I'm given a sense of her wishes, her health, where she is and what she wants. She wants this to go away. And she's tired of what this is doing to me and my daughter. Not because she fears me. She thinks I'm about as tough as a piece of dandelion fluff. She knows me better than anyone else. And she's the one person whose support I need through this. And I can't hold her in my arms and reassure her that we're going to survive this as a family. I can't tell my kid when and if I'll be home. And the second and third hand support I'm getting from my spouse is that she's fighting for me as hard as she can. I don't think that violence is an appropriate solution to any problem, ever, at all. And I teach my child that. I don't tolerate her manifesting any form of violence to her peers, or her mom, or me. It's off the table. I think we may need to look at what we perceive as violence. I think we need to re-entitle and re-empower men to be more comfortable expressing dissatisfaction and anger. I think we have to educate men more about the use of the archetypes we're socialized with, because assertiveness is perceived as aggressiveness. I think a lot of what we do and how we act is misperceived. My wife and I used to yell at each other in the grocery store over cottage cheese because she was in the next aisle. We had a lot of healthy verbal conflict. It was heated. I had a new career, she had a college education, and we would voice our displeasure with animated gestures and loud voices. It didn't mean we didn't love each other. It didn't mean we weren't committed to each other. My wife's a scrappy woman, and when she yells at me, there's never ever the impression that she's going to hit me. There's never any concern about what's going on behind closed doors. I'm never told of these subtle signs of the pattern of her abuse. I think women are more powerful than we give them credit for, or that this system gives them credit for. I don't like the odds of me and my spouse in a fair fight one bit. To be honest, if it came down to it, she'd mop the floor with me. I'm afraid of her. I used to call her my little M1 Abrams tank, because she's the toughest, strongest person I've ever met. And now she's been reduced to a victim. And if you were to speak to her on this, I don't think that'd be her take. I think she'd be insulted and offended that she's been robbed of a voice and perceived as someone not competent of parenting or making effective choices. So I don't think they're doing enough to sanction truly violent men and safeguard truly at-risk women. I don't. And I don't know if they ever will be unless we give men an empowered seat at the table to help shape that. Because even for a domestic abuser, he must have a perspective that can add to treating it. That's my alienation, and the solution is to do more classic man stuff, to suck it up, and to pay another man in a suit to lobby on my behalf and speak my truth for me. Resources I'd rather apply to my wife's education or my daughter's future education.